All right, take two. First rule of this channel, we do not talk about this channel. Second rule of this channel, this is not legal advice. So this is going to be the process video on how I find those guys in my leagues that are under and overvalued going into the season. This is the pre-draft. I think it's going to be really difficult to put any of the rookies up there as high-end draftability. There may be a couple guys to take flyers on. I do like Caleb Williams. I just don't know if he's going to have enough passing volume or rushing upside to really be draftable outside of that dart throw range. I think there are probably better guys to be throwing darts at this point in the season. Right now, the league winner from last year is going to be Jordan Love. I will talk about him a little bit more in a second, but he was basically going undrafted, if not, in those dart throw range. And he finishes wide receiver 5, I think it was overall. Plus, he got it done in the weeks that matter. He got it done week 17, most leagues, like 28 points, like probably won you your chip if you're rolling Jordan Love out, and he probably cost you nothing to find that out on the season. So that's what we're moving on. News and notes for today. The only one I think it really matters is Devontae Smith re-signed with the Eagles. Remember that Tyreek Hill contract, $30 million is the bar. And they signed Devontae Smith 3 years, $75 million deal. That puts him in line with AJ Brown at $25 million. And then they have on this thing, Devontae Adams at 28, Cooper Kupp at 26.7. So the Eagles value him as a, mid-range wide receiver 1. And Devontae Smith, that's where he sees him sees himself out, at least for the next 3 years when it comes to the Eagles. May actually end up moving him up my list. I have him right now as wide receiver 21, and I could definitely see moving him up almost to maybe wide receiver 18 because of this, ahead of Debo and Ayuk, expecting that the possibility that the Eagles paid him, and now they're going to showcase him a little bit more coming into the season. The other thing I want to talk about, I was watching a podcast. They were talking about Michael Pittman. And they were saying that he's probably overvalued. I think a 3rd round grade. I have Michael Pittman as wide receiver 10, and my thought process why I would have a wide receiver 10 is because I still think that there's a range of outcomes where he's wide receiver 1. He just gets the targets, and I can probably pull him up so we can talk about him a little bit on a quarterback video, because that's just the type of guy I am. And so Michael Pittman, expecting, even though he didn't necessarily have the greatest outcome with Anthony Richardson at quarterback, I don't think they drafted Anthony Richardson to not use him as a passing quarterback. That's what they literally said. He needs reps. He doesn't need reps as a runner. He needs reps as a passer. So you don't always have to believe coach speak or GM speak or front office speak. But at the end of the day, like they do want him to be a successful quarterback, and just having him be a runner is probably not something good. So with Michael Pittman, this is just my thought process. After I listened to their argument, I did feel the urge to move him down, and ultimately I didn't. And that would be based off the fact that, like, I could see him finishing as wide receiver 20, and I could see him as finishing as wide receiver 1 overall. Again, 156 targets last year. May end up being the beneficiary of that RPO first look type of thing, getting the targets up there. Not necessarily the most efficient targets, but again, expecting that there may be some of those more efficient targets down the line, and then trying to pick the middle range of outcomes. And I think that he's going to be very wild. So maybe I would end up moving him down a little bit, just because maybe a little too volatile for wide receiver 10. But at the end of the day, yeah, I could definitely see a big, fast receiver finishing that runs in breaking routes, finishing as wide receiver 1 overall. So that's why I would tend to keep him there. So anyway, moving on to the actual stuff, the quarterback stuff on the season. What we're looking at is other guys that are going to be undervalued relative to their ADP. And you see Jared Goff, a guy that I didn't particularly like last year. He finished as wide receiver or quarterback 7. You have Brock Purdy that was basically going undrafted. He finishes quarterback 6. So if you're paying your capital on your Josh Allen's, your Jalen Hurts, they probably return quarterback 3 or quarterback 1 and quarterback 2. But you were probably looking at like a 3rd round draft pick to go get these guys. I was seeing some leagues, and these are more competitive leagues, where they were finishing as like quarterback or in the 2nd round. That's where they're getting drafted at. Even a guy like Dak, who was going in that late quarterback, dart throw range. finishes at quarterback 3. And again, some of these numbers end up being a little deceiving because if they don't get it done in the right weeks, week 14 when you need that win to get in, week 15, 16, 17, their overall value is kind of limited, even though the probability aspect, the gambling aspect of fantasy football gets in the way of what would statistically be a good overall pick. So even like Patrick Mahomes that was going up there in the big three, finishes as quarterback 8, definitely did not return on investment. So what I'm looking for is guys that will return on my investment, with the big payout, not the little payout. And sometimes playing it safe and getting Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts is the right play to get me into my playoffs. It may not be the right play to win me a league. So moving on from that, when we start breaking these guys down, I have Brock Purdy first. We're just going to go through all the teams. Again, there's a possibility that we can see a little bit positive regression, quote unquote, with passing yards and passing touchdowns overall. Does have a little nimbly bimbly in him. That'll win you probably like 2 weeks, those 2 rushing touchdowns that he did get on the ground. Overall, I could definitely see that he'll finish at like 3,800 to 4,500 yards and 25 to 40 touchdowns. I think that's his range of outcomes. Probably going to be draftable. Probably going to be in that range of like safer guys just based off the toys. Not going to be necessarily a league winner unless he's really going to not cost you money. And in a 12 quarterback league, he's going to relatively go probably about like quarterback 10, 11, 12. Probably where he's best suited to go. Let's see, moving on to the Bengals. So right now, or excuse me, to the Bears, as I should slow down and just think about my words. So right now we are kind of expecting Caleb Williams to go to the Bears. Caleb Williams can be a little nimbly bimbly if he does go there. Again, we're projecting, and that can when you assume, it can make an ass out of you and me. But with Caleb Williams going there, I'm a little intrigued because he does have the rushing upside, and if as a rookie, he might tend to lean a little bit more on the rushing ability. Kind of not entirely his game. He is a little bit more of a passive passing guy than he is a running guy. That would be a knock a little bit on him, but he would have some of the athletic measurables to be the rusher, the cheat code quarterback if we wanted him to be, and then with the way that the Bears are setting up their offense right now with DeAndre Swift and Keenan Allen and DJ Moore and Cole Kmet, they may be that higher passing volume offense. So like when we look last year at like a Josh Allen, that 411 fantasy points, 524 yards, 15 touchdowns, probably not something that we could expect Caleb Williams to get, but maybe he could be pushing for 3,000 yards or 4,000 yards passing, 30 touchdowns, 500 yards rushing. May not be outside of that range of expectations, and then maybe closer to like 5 to 7 touchdowns for Caleb Williams. And that's really going to depend mostly on where he's going in drafts. So right now, Caleb Williams, like on Fantasy Pros, quarterback 17 overall, probably in that dart throw range. And if I was making a comp with 2 quarterbacks, like he would be a guy I would be going after. I probably would not be very comfortable in a lot of leagues letting a guy like him hit my waiver wire. That's also something to be considering going into your drafts. What guys have the ability to win a league for one of your opponents? So I would rather, and I talked about this last year, I would rather have a Jordan Love sitting at the bottom of my bench, even though I own Josh Allen, than have a Jordan Love face me in the fantasy finals, and that would have cost me my league more than likely. So moving on from the Bears, so I pulled this up to the Bengals. Joe Burrow, so should be bouncing back off of that like injury disappointment 2023. And one of the things with Joe Burrow, like probably should be rated a little bit higher than where he's going to go at. 2021, 2022, 4,600 yards, 4,500 yards. Does have deceptive nimbly bimbly, and this is kind of the things that we talk about, like 5 rushing touchdowns in 2022, 3 as a rookie in only 10 games. So he does have the ability to give you those spike weeks on the ground along with like high volume passing offense. This is one of the things I talked about when it came to moving. God, who was it? Anyway, to moving somebody up the board a couple of weeks ago from a fantasy perspective. I would talk about Joe Burrow, probably being a little bit low. It was moving CJ Stroud up. I would still keep Joe Burrow about quarterback 5, and that's because the high volume passing offense and that deceptive ability to get rushing touchdowns, like probably has the safe ability to return at quarterback 5. also has the ability to win me enough weeks on the ground that he probably shouldn't be moved down. That's why I would still keep CJ Stroud probably about quarterback 8, and a guy like Kyler Murray would be a little bit higher. So Joe Burrow, again, the high volume passing offense to go with that little bit of rushing ability, something that I would be looking at, probably going to be undervalued in a lot of leagues, especially coming off of the injury. Moving on to Josh Allen, expecting that Josh Allen is probably going to be overvalued, and we can go look it up and see that like Josh Allen's quarterback 1 overall. I always tend to bet the under. That's just me. If you bet the over, you're that type of guy. I can understand that, but expecting that there may be an overall decline in passing efficiency with the loss of Stephon Diggs, and that the 15 touchdowns is probably going to decline. So like he's not going to be this quarterback 1 with a bullet. I would maybe expect him to have a closer season to Jalen Hurts overall, with 3,800 yards, maybe the low end of what Josh Allen will do. Maybe he's going to have that 500 yards passing or rushing again. And again, probably closer to 7 touchdowns. Not going to be a 40-point difference between quarterback 1 and quarterback 2 that I would be expecting. But again, if you're going to go out and spend on good old Josh Allen, you're looking at in a lot of even competitive leagues, him being pushed up to the 2nd round or the 3rd round of your draft. And that's probably too rich because I tend to think that I can find the league winner. All right. Moving on to the Broncos, probably going to guess that the Broncos are going to go out and get a rookie. And I can pull this up. Have no idea. Like they even if the Broncos go pull the trigger on a quarterback, and they are right now quarterback 12 overall, the guys that I would expect them to go out and get in the draft based off of how poorly designed that the Broncos are, I wouldn't be interested in. So even like Jaden Daniels, who has that high rushing upside, I would just go, it might be too big of a train wreck overall to really enjoy the possibility of the right guy going there, because I just don't think they're the right guy. We'll talk about the Patriots a little bit later. Moving on to the Browns. So right now, expecting Deshaun Watson's back. He's going to be one of those guys, especially like in deeper leagues, that is worth a dart throw. So on Fantasy Pros, because I don't like the ESPN rankings right now, Deshaun Watson, quarterback 21, probably like well undervalued relative to what he can do. So when we look at his overall rushing ability, that's really what you're paying for more than what we're expecting him to do in Cleveland through the air. So probably closer to this 2019, 3,800 yards passing, 26 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, 400 yards rushing, 5 to 7 touchdowns. That would be more of a moderate estimate of what Deshaun Watson can do if he could actually finish the season. So injured last year, the suspension in 2022, hasn't really played football. It didn't really play football in 2021 because of being on the exempt list. So that's exactly where I think he should go. So he probably should be pushed up closer to this dart throw range. Quarterback, like I would go like 18 to 13 is probably where Deshaun Watson should go because of his ability to potentially win a league with the rushing upside. All right, moving on. Buccaneers. So Baker May is going to be probably limited. He does have some toys, but like he's never going to be that true rushing quarterback. Like I was tracking this last year on after waivers, that he is going to probably have like 1 or 2 rushing touchdowns. That's just kind of his game. But you see this the spike year where he has career high in passing touchdowns and passing yards, and part of that's going to be because of the extra game that goes on in there. So like expecting that this is probably his over underline. Again, I'm always going to pick the under, especially on the passing yardage and the passing touchdowns. Maybe could go with the over on the rushing yards next year. But overall, like he finished as quarterback 10, and depending on your league size, that's probably not a bad bet that he's going to be around quarterback 10. It's going to be like, well, what's the chance that he's going to be able to win my league if I get quarterback 10? And right now with Baker May, you're looking at quarterback 22 overall. Probably not going to be able to really return on investment. Even if he finishes at quarterback 10, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to move the needle week to week, because there are going to be guys that aren't good that we thought were going to be good, and the guys are going to get injured. So just because you get quarterback 10 means that you didn't get Anthony Richardson, who got hurt in the first weeks, even though he may have been the most valuable quarterback overall on a points per play basis. All right. Cardinals. So Kyler Murray is going to be a little undervalued. And again, this is mostly based off the fact that he's got this massive rushing upside. So 2020, 800 yards rushing, and then another 11 rushing touchdowns. As quarterbacks get older, they tend to not be as rushy, and they tend to be more, I'm gonna protect myself by not getting hit all the time. So I would overall expect the decline in the rushing ability. So probably like 400 yards is probably the over under with Kyler. Like 5 rushing touchdowns would probably be the over under. Probably not going to hit that 4,000 yards passing. So like probably 3,500 yards, 20 touchdowns is what you're looking at. But that's going to make him like really competitive. And it's really going to come down to what his ADP is. So Kyler Murray is quarterback 9 when he has quarterback 1 range of outcomes, I think is undervalued. Kyler Murray going at like quarterback, and I think I have him listed as quarterback 8 or something like that right now. That's probably a little bit better. And even though it's a like one person spot, but again, I'm probably going to be targeting him and Anthony Richardson in most of my redraft leagues, and just hoping that I get one of those guys that can go compete with the guy who spends a second or third round pick on a Hurts or a Josh Allen. That would be my plan overall. All right. Chargers, Justin Herbert, definitely going to be undervalued this year, but like his range of outcomes is going to be like really unpredictable. With Harbaugh coming in as the coach, he does have a little deceptive nimbly bimbly in him overall. So he's going to get somewhere like, probably like 3 rushing touchdowns on the season, has the ability to throw like, as you see in 2021, 38 touchdowns. So he could flirt with 40 touchdowns, has thrown for 5,000 yards on a season. I'm not entirely sure that's going to be the offense, but you can kind of look at a little bit of that rushing upside, high volume passing offense. It's within his range of outcomes. Probably should be baked into his ADP. Quarterback 13, that's probably about where he should go. Just based off of the variable of not understanding how the offense is going to function. You're betting on the talent more so than the situation at that point. So he would be one of those guys I would feel comfortable throwing a dart at, as long as I was spending somebody else to go along with him to offset the potential to disappoint from a fantasy perspective. Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, a little bit of a disappointing year last year overall, but I think that was mostly predictable. Expecting that we might get that positive progression in the passing yardage, 4,100 yards last year, and maybe more passing touchdowns. I could definitely see that they attempt to lean on Isaiah Pacheco a little bit more this year, and so those numbers may not change. Didn't find the end zone, which I find surprising just looking at his stats right now. And then the 389 rushing yards, which were a career high, and that's again in 16 games. So overall, like maybe a regression in that. You're going to get a positive regression in touchdowns to bet on. May not get too much more passing yardage, and surprisingly, if they are going to lean on Pacheco, and right now why I would speculate on that is because they haven't brought in anybody else to really eat in that role. Also expecting that Rashee Rice was maybe going to be the red zone guy, and the legal problems there. So like may not get too much more out of the passing game than was maybe originally thought. So probably slightly overvalued at quarterback 4, just a little bit. Don't think he's necessarily going to be able to get quarterback 1 this year. Probably more likely to disappoint again, be closer to quarterback 8, and then drafting him at that ADP to kind of find out is not necessarily the best idea in the world when you're drafting a guy at the top of his range of outcomes. All right, Colt. So this is a guy that I'm talking about that I'll be looking to target in all my leagues. So I think he's going to be easy to get at quarterback 6 overall. That's probably where he should be at. That is more baked in that there's going to be an injury problem than there is actually going to be a production issue with Anthony Richardson. So again, I think I pointed out before, like he led all quarterbacks in points, fantasy points per play coming into the season. So I'm not really concerned if he's good at football. He's going to have this rushing ability. I imagine that they might not have him be as reckless. So his overall rushing touchdowns, and this 4 games is probably like not actually accurate. He got knocked out of week 2 and week 5. So it's more like 3 games where he put up the stat line. which is ridiculous when you think about it. So like, yeah, like I would be going up and spending the money on the opportunity to get quarterback 1 overall at quarterback 6 prices. That's just a way to win the league. And then when I could couple an Anthony Richardson with a Kyler or a Joe Burrow or a Justin Herbert, and there's other guys down the line like Caleb Williams. Will Levis is a guy I'm going to talk about a little bit later. I could put these two guys together. I could hedge my bets, buy insurance. And it just really depends on what's left on my board as I get into those later rounds. If there's like running backs that I'm going to go after, then that's a good idea. If there's not, the quarterbacks and tight ends that are left on the board come round 12, 13 are the only guys that really can return at that point. All right, Washington. So again, expecting that they're going to bring in a quarterback. They are drafting right now, and I can clear this out. They are drafting right now at the number 2 spot. There are some weapons there. I don't necessarily like the offensive line, but there at least are weapons in Washington, and that's something we can't really talk about with the Patriots. And when I look at like whoever they bring in, and I'm not the biggest fan of Jaden Daniels. I think that that everybody's flawed. As I get older, I start to realize that everybody's flawed, so I get less excited about everybody. But Jaden Daniels does have the rushing upside that I like. I don't necessarily know how much he's going to draft or 1-to-1 go into the NFL and expect that you're going to get the passing return that he was able to do in college. That's what would bother me the most about him. But he would be the guy I would expect to go there. If he goes there, he has at least with the rushing ability, and he's not necessarily the best rusher in the world. He's just an athlete. He would have the range of outcomes to finish with the rushing yards from a fantasy perspective that could win me a league. So being in that like Lamar Jackson type tier of 800 yards rushing, I could definitely see Jaden Daniels doing something like that. It's really going to be guessing what the passing upside is, and if he could stay healthy, that would limit his ability. So he's definitely in dart throw range. And because of that rushing ability and what we've seen with like Justin Fields and some of these other quarterbacks coming into the league, like drafting a guy like that in this range of like 13 to 18, just to make sure that someone else doesn't get that rushing upside is not a bad idea, even though I wouldn't necessarily be putting all my eggs in one basket that I have a league winner. Let's see. Cowboys, Dak. So Dak's probably going to be flirting right there. He's quarterback 3 last year, which is a little surprising. Does have the ability to have high rush or passing volume, which is what we like. Does have the ability to get those passing touchdowns with all those weapons that he's going to get. Still has a little bit of nimbly bimbly, even though he hasn't been the same guy since he broke his ankle all the way back here in 2020. So it doesn't quite have that rushing upside. Still can win you a couple weeks. So I'm going to go ahead and say that he's probably going to be a little undervalued. Quarterback 8, yeah, that's about where he's going to go. So he's probably not undervalued at all. But yeah, that's I think that he's a really good, solid choice, probably to go at the price that he's going at, and still has that rushing upside that we look for. I could see that he could take that quote unquote step forward, be closer to 5,000 yards passing. I could also see that there may be a little limitation in talent, and you're closer to 4,000 yards passing. I could see either one of those being baked into this range of outcomes. But overall, drafting quarterback 8, expecting to get quarterback 8 is not necessarily a bad idea at the price that you're going to probably get, because most of your leagues at that point, you're looking at a guy probably going in somewhere between like the 6th and the 9th round of your draft. I would probably take that bet overall, depending on who else is available. Let's see. Dolphins, Tua. So Tua is going to be a guy that's going to be very limited from the rushing aspect. That's just not going to necessarily be his game. You see in 2020, 2021, did have those 3 rushing touchdowns. I'm not as concerned with the health issues. I still think this is going to be relatively high passing volume offense. I'm a little more concerned with the talent limitations with Tua, knowing that if I go out and I spend on quarterback 12, I'm probably going to get about quarterback 12. And even if I get quarterback 9, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's a big enough difference maker to win me a league. That's just my thoughts on Tua. So like, I'm just not interested in a guy like that overall, because of some of the capped rushing upside going into the season. Hopefully you guys hear the garbage truck outside my house. Jalen Hurts, The problem with Jalen Hurts is always just going to be cost. Again, you're probably looking at like a second or third round draft pick to get him. I'm expecting maybe a little bit of regression. Well, I'm definitely expecting a regression in rushing touchdowns. Expecting that he's going to be somewhere between like 600 and 800 yards rushing is not probably a bad idea. Not necessarily expecting him to take a step forward as a passer. So I'm not expecting a lot more passing touchdowns, even from a overall passing yardage perspective. They did bring in Saquon Barkley. I would expect that like the over underline is going to be about 3,800 passing yards, even if he stays healthy. Maybe he can flirt with 4,000. I'm probably going to guess that he's maybe closer to like 3,500 yards passing, something that he's done in the past. Or 15 games in 2022 had 3,700 yards passing. So you could say like if he's healthy, like maybe he can flirt closer to 4,000 yards. I can see him taking a step back because the offense doesn't need him to be a passer. And that's probably the problem when we start talking about some of the theory down the line is how good the defense is. We want a really good offense with a really bad defense, going back to those Dak Prescott days when he broke his ankle. To bring this up, Dak Prescott this year, when he broke his ankle 2020, when he was on pace for like 7,200 yards passing before he broke his ankle in five games. So like those are the things that we kind of look for from a fantasy perspective, those outlier seasons. And I just don't see a way that Jalen Hurts is going to do that. And I'm going to have to pay to find out that he's probably only going to be able to disappoint me. So moving on to the Falcons, we have Kirk Cousins this year. And I could probably pull him up so we could talk about good old Kirk. I'm expecting him to do more for the toys than it's actually going to be Kirk Cousins being able to return very much. He did have a quarterback 6 and in 2022 and quarterback 6 in 2017, quarterback 5 in 2016. Overall, going to probably have the range of outcomes to flirt as a top 10 quarterback. I'm just not entirely sure they're going to need him to do anything more than keep the offense on track. So not entirely expecting that anything special is going to happen out of good old Kurt. Not expecting that there's going to be like hardly any rushing upside with him. And then you're kind of betting that he's going to have that higher volume passing offense. May not be what I get out of him. So 30 touchdowns, probably like 4,200 yards would be the over under I would be expecting on Kurt, with the ability that, like, since I don't know how that offense is necessarily going to function, could really disappoint. So I just don't know if he's even draftable in most leagues. Let's see. The Giants. So I did see the day that Daniel Jones is tracking to be going to training camp with the ACL. Deeper leagues, maybe a dart throw. 2022 finishes quarterback 9 with the 700 yards rushing and 7 touchdowns. Like, that's still probably going to be the top end of his range of outcomes. He's every year that guy gets older, less rushing upside coming off the ACL. Not expecting to have very much of a being a difference maker in the passing game. That's going to hurt him overall. So outside of that dart throw to replicate that 2022 rushing upside, just not going to be enough there. And they're right now, the Giants just don't have anything on offense that I'm interested in. Again, when I'm tracking Jalen Hyatt to be a dart throw as the wide receiver 1, and Darren Waller may not even come back as the tight end. Like, even if Daniel Jones is good at football, jury's out on that. Maybe you've already made up your mind that he's not. I just don't know how he's going to get it done on the season. And this is probably like a last ditch effort by the Giants coaching staff and front office to keep their jobs. If he can't get it done, the whole franchise is probably going to gut itself and reboot at this point. So I'm not interested in that, even though I'm going to rank him up higher towards the dart throw range of quarterbacks. So Trevor Lawrence, and I've been talking about him a lot in the last like 2 years now, that I just don't know how good at football he is. Hasn't turned that corner. Probably 4,000 yards. Yeah, maybe he could flirt with 30 touchdowns. I don't know if he's going to flirt with 5,000 yards. That's what we need 4,500, 5,000 yards passing to get the highest high volume passing offense. Does have the nimbly bimbly, so again, paying quarterback 12 prices to get quarterback 12 return. Trevor Lawrence going at quarterback 16, probably a little bit undervalued, primarily because of this rushing upside that he's probably going to still have. But I just don't know if there's going to be enough passing volume and passing touchdowns to push him to that next tier. So he's just okay. Like, I guess that's the best way to put it. Okay doesn't necessarily win me a league. Okay, and I could bring up story time. I won a chip with Ryan Tannehill as my quarterback because I just picked him up off waivers. I was streaming that year, so like that would be how I would attack a Trevor Lawrence. Someone may draft him, and then throw him away, and then if you miss on like an Anthony Richardson, a guy like Trevor Lawrence is probably going to be on your waiver wire in a lot of redraft leagues. In like your dynasty leagues, I he probably like worth a bag of chips. I don't know. Like I would speculate on some of the other higher upside guys at that point. Let's see. Jets, Aaron Rodgers. The age is going to be the big issue with Aaron Rodgers. I don't think they need Aaron Rodgers to do anything more than uh, probably this 2019 season would probably be a better way to look at it. Like 4,000 yards passing, 26 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Not going to have very much nimbly bimbly. What nimbly bimbly he did have, and he used to be a high rushing upside quarterback, or not high upside rushing, the deceptively athletic quarterback. That's probably gone away. The Achilles tear is probably really going to hurt him, his overall value when it comes to any rushing upside they're going to have. He just needs to be more of a game manager with some gunslinger in him in those handful of games where the Jets defense is not going to be able to keep them competitive. And that's going to really cap like whatever ceiling is left in him. Again, probably better for the toys than from a fantasy perspective. Lions. And after me eating a whole bunch of crow last year with Jared Goff finished as quarterback 7, I'm going to have very limited rushing upside, as you see here. Just not going to be part of his game. Probably going to be able to fall in the end zone a couple times on the season. Little surprising that he was able to get the passing volume. Overall, like that's still going to be well within his range of outcomes. I mean, you're looking at a guy with like five targets on offense, like still going to be able to get it done. Most of those guys on offense can probably take one of the a check down to the house, so that's going to help his upside overall. I would put his over under at about 4,500 yards, 30 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. And again, I don't know how he's going to win you a league. And with the limited rushing upside, you're looking at a guy who's going to have that ability to give you 12 points in the finals, or 14 points in the semis, 6 points in week 14. That's why I tend to stay away from a guy like this, even though he does have those potential 5 touchdown spike weeks. If I can find that week 15, 5 touchdown spike week. He had week 5, 5 touchdowns in week 15. He's going to have that range of outcomes. Again, like if you're into that type of thing, it's going to probably cost you relatively nothing to find that out. Quarterback 14, that's probably about where he should be valued. It's going to run into the issue of consistency when you have Gibbs and Montgomery that are able to vulture those touchdowns. As much as he has the toys to have 5 touchdown weeks, he's going to have other weeks where he's just not going to have to score any touchdowns, and there's probably a little bit of a dearth of talent overall, so he's going to have these turnover machine type of weeks. Overall, 12 interceptions, four fumbles. That's going to be there too. Man, like playing with fire with Jared Goff, if you're into that type of thing. Packers, Jordan Love, like I talked about, league winner last year. This was the guy to own. Not spending any draft capital on him, going out and get him. Not to pat myself on my own back, like I did have him evaluated as like the highest upside guy coming out of the draft, 2020. That doesn't mean that I necessarily thought that he was going to be the best guy in the draft. I just thought like he had the deceptive measurables, the athletic measurables, probably a little bit higher rushing upside than I was actually anticipating, because he just wasn't that type of guy in college. Had more nimbly bimbly in him to throw than he was like, I'm going to put this on the ground and go run. Again, probably with all those toys, like 4,000 yards passing, 3,200 yard or 32 touchdowns, 30 touchdowns, probably like what you're looking at. Probably going to be range of outcomes like 5 to 7 is what I would be expecting, unless there's like a huge regression. And going at quarterback 10 like probably has a little bit of baked in value. I could definitely see he's going to be one of those guys that takes that quote unquote jump forward. This year, like could be flirting with like 4,500 yards passing, 5,000 yards passing, something else I could expect that they might be doing. Josh Jacobs might scare me a little bit. They could lean on Josh Jacobs if he hasn't lost a step, which would probably cut into some of the overall touchdowns. I wouldn't be expecting anything more from a rushing perspective. If anything, I'd be going under on the rushing perspective. So, like, if I was just going to go, hey, I don't want to think about my quarterback position. I'm just going to go smash Jordan Love and go someplace else with my other picks. Not a bad way to be constructing my roster. All right, Panthers. So I think there is a little bit of quiet optimism going on with Bryce Young. Never going to be a rushing upside guy. That's just what he wasn't in college. Could see him flirting with 4,000 yards passing and 30 touchdowns this year, which would give him some value overall from a fantasy perspective. If we're trying to comp him out, Patrick Mahomes, like honestly, that Patrick Mahomes' stat line from last year is probably what I would see the top end range of outcomes for Bryce Young this year. No joke whatsoever. Even with some of the rushing upside and the lack of rushing touchdowns, I could see that being what you're looking at with Bryce Young. And as long as his price is right going into the season, and I'm trying to hunt down Bryce Young, as long as his price is right, especially in 2 quarterback leagues, or if you're speculating in deeper leagues and you can carry 2 quarterbacks, and I'm sure I'm just totally missing him. That would be something I would be looking at with Bryce Young. It does look like they're going to try not to throw that pick away, and that would give me at least a little bit, like I said, quiet optimism. So Bryce Young, quarterback 30, yeah, I definitely see that he's going to have a much higher range of outcomes to finish the season. I could definitely see him flirting with top 12 quarterback. So, if I'm throwing a dart, he's going to be deceptively rated higher in my rankings just because it's really easy to come back from this bad of a season and somewhat have some fantasy relevant weeks. Even last year on the season, he did have week 5 where he threw 3 touchdowns, and then week 16 where he threw 2. Was expecting he was going to have a better week in week 17 in the chip as a streamer. Didn't get it done. But I could definitely see that he's going to be a little bit better this year. I don't know how much fantasy value that's going to bring to that. Deontay Johnson is probably going to help him a little bit. This is one of those offenses that I think you could spend on, expecting a bad offense to be good because of how relatively cheap it's going to cost me to be wrong. I don't think he has league winner written on him. He's not that type of guy. But like super flex, he's going to definitely be able to win you some leagues or leagues. Have the range of outcomes to do that. I don't know, over the course of his career, this is not about a talent conversation. This is about like a potential range of outcomes, like could flirt with winning some leagues at a certain point as being so undervalued that he could have a top 10 season. My Ryan Tannehill, a Jared Goff type of range of outcomes where you're spending nothing on a guy. You can pick him up off of waivers and get a few spike weeks. All right. Patriots. So this is another one. Like, it doesn't really matter who goes to the Patriots because they may be the worst offense in football. No joke. So like, even though I think there is some, as the guy from PFF said, like hairband Josh Allen with like your Drake Mays and your JJ McCarthy's deceptive athletic ability. I don't know if like a Drake May goes to the Patriots that I would be interested in. The train wreck. You're looking at a Bryce Young type of outcome because of how bad the offense is set up for these guys. Going to the Patriots overall, like I said, like even that optimism of the rushing upside with Jane Daniels goes away if he goes to the Patriots because like there's just no one to throw to and he's just going to be running for his life overall. So I would be staying away from that at least for the time being. Like they could do something in the draft that changes my mind to give the supporting cast to whoever quarterback would potentially go there at pick 3 overall, just to make sure I'm not full of it. I was seeing some mocks where the Patriots would trade out and pick up that quarterback later on because they can amass some capital to go along with it to build up that rookie quarterback. And it's not a deep class at quarterback. I don't think that's necessarily fair. I think it's one of those things that like you can find a guy that more fits your scheme if you want, and you can also take a shot at some of these deeper guys later on in the draft is going to cost you less capital. After Caleb Williams, I'm not sure that anybody else is necessarily worth the risk that you're going to be putting into the pick overall, even though I do like a guy like JJ McCarthy, and I do like some of the argumentation on Bo Nix just being that like, a quick release, type of guy. Michael Penix, like there's some stuff to like about some of these guys. Like I just don't know how much it's going to translate into like year one of fantasy football. All right. Raiders. So maybe Aiden O'Connell starts season. I talked about this a little bit. Like I liked him a little bit as a prospect coming out in 2023. Did not like how he finished the season. Obviously, like a change to the coaching style where it's just like, hey, game manage us, we'll win with our defense. Um, some stuff to like, probably not going to be anything more than top end guy, the type of guy that'll lose you a Super Bowl, which is surprising. Not surprising because the other guy to go with that the Raiders brought in was Gardner Minshew. And, as much as I love Gardner Minshew, I think that his range of outcomes is outside of getting a little bit of luck is being the guy that'll lose you a Super Bowl as his top end range of outcomes. So overall, from like the Raiders perspective, Gardner Minshew probably gives the toys a little bit better range of outcomes than Aiden O'Connell does. Fantasy perspective, like Gardner Minshew probably has a slightly higher upside, low end starter in deeper leagues, high end streamer. And I don't even think Aiden O'Connell's there. He's not going to be nimbly bimbly like at all. That's not going to be his game. Would have to win as a higher volume passing offense. The coach is not going to be that type of guy. They're going to win with defense. They're going to run the football. They're going to say, hey, do only what you need to do. Think JJ McCarthy in Michigan last year. That's what they're going to expect of Aiden O'Connell. Gardner Minshew might be slightly more of a guy that they'll say, hey, we might need you to go win us some games. But overall, like neither of those guys are going to be on the fantasy radar. The Rams. So Matt Stafford has flirted with being fantasy relevant, and he was flirting with being fantasy relevant last year. Needs high passing volume. With Kieran Williams there, I'm not sure he's going to necessarily get that high passing volume. This is not something that the Rams are going to need him to do. 2021, 4,800 yards passing, 41 touchdowns. Yeah, that's still there. That potential range of outcomes is still going to be there for him. Getting older, I think that they're going to lean on Kieran Williams a little bit more. Passing volume is going to go down. Maybe 4,000 to 4,500 yards passing, 30 touchdowns. But without the rushing upside, it's going to be really hard road for him to return on investment. So if we're looking at Matt Stafford being quarterback 18, wouldn't surprise me that he finishes about quarterback 18. Very limited ability to win me a league. Maybe again in your two quarterback leagues, he's going to have a little bit more value with a little bit of upside if they do turn it into a higher volume passing offense. Ravens. So again, Lamar Jackson's a better overall fantasy guy, better football player than he is a quarterback. Going to be very unpredictable overall. They don't necessarily need the higher volume passing from him, and then he's going to be heavily rushing based. And again, trying to guess the touchdowns on a guy who's rushing is going to be difficult. They're bringing in Derrick Henry. That does not bode well for his overall upside. That means that they're not expecting to have to throw the football more. Derrick Henry's not going to be involved with it. Maybe play action. Maybe that could push his overall passing numbers higher because of getting home on those chunk plays. Maybe he has to take a step back as a rusher in certain years because they don't need him to be the nimbly bimbly guy to win. I mean, to try and maximize Lamar Jackson, and he does have quarterback one in his range of outcomes. So for those out there that are not, that are have some listening comprehension, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is for me to guess on Lamar Jackson's range of outcomes, and right now he's quarterback 3. Yeah, he can finish as quarterback 1. Even in a healthy year, you're probably looking at like quarterback 10 as a potential range of outcomes. We're not going to know how that offense shakes out on a week-to-week basis. And that means like your 36 points that you get in your chip because you drafted Lamar Jackson because you're smart is also the same guy that gives you 10 points in week 5 against Pittsburgh. So you lose that week. And if that week comes up at the wrong time, my big problem with Lamar Jackson overall from a fantasy perspective is in order for me to go get him, I have to spend like quarterback your second to like say 4th round value on Lamar Jackson. And from my perspective, how I do my fantasy, I would rather go get a Brock Purdy or Jordan Love, for free than spend on that draft capital at the between the 2nd and 4th rounds. That's just how I roll. And if you like getting that very volatile quarterback that can definitely win you a league, and you want to spend that capital. And to get a Lamar Jackson, to be honest, in a lot of leagues, like you're probably pushing probably closer to third round to go jump up and make sure he's there than to wait for him to fall to you in the fourth round. And I don't think that's a very good strategy one way or another. So moving on to the Saints, not going to say a lot about this. The Derek Carr's not going to have the nimbly bimbly. That's just not going to happen. Probably also not going to be part of a high enough volume passing offense. Going to have some ability to have some passing spike weeks and some throwing touchdown spike weeks. And you see like week 15, week 16, that's going to be his ability. And with the toys that he's going to have in New Orleans, going to be very limited ability to win one quarterback leagues. And he's going to just be a nice quarterback two in two quarterback leagues. Right now, Derek Carr, quarterback 25, probably about where he deserves to be going. See, Seattle, very similar type of conversation we had with Geno Smith. Was expecting the possibility of the rushing upside to go up this year, which means potentially more rushing touchdowns. He does have some nimbly bimbly in him. You see, as a rookie, 6 touchdowns, 366 yards rushing. That was a possibility that it was going to, we're going to get 4,200 yards passing, 30 touchdowns, and that 366 rushing yards with 1 touchdown. He finishes quarterback 5 in 2022. Was one of those guys that was a dart throw in 2023. I expect that like his numbers are probably going to be closer to what he did in 2023, projecting into 2024, then you're getting that 2022 range of outcomes, which is probably the tip of what he could do anyway. So even if he finishes at quarterback 5, his best value to do that is to let him go undrafted and then pick him up off of waivers if he looks like he's going to be 2022 Geno Smith. If he's not 2022 Geno Smith, he's not even worth speculating on in 2 quarterback leagues. All right, moving on, almost done. Pittsburgh, gonna have a little bit of value with Russ because he's still gonna be a little bit of a rusher, if I can find the right guy. So last year, even though it was a train wreck season for everybody, he still did 3 touchdowns and 340 yards rushing, and that was on 15 games played. Probably not going to reach the passing volume that he would push him into, that range of outcomes. I'm looking like 20, 15, 4,000 yards passing, 34 touchdowns. That's to go along with a high of 800 yards rushing and 6 touchdowns for Seattle. Not going to be that quarterback. Still going to have the ability to flirt with quarterback like 8 to 14 as a range of outcomes, more than likely. If you can get the rushing yards to go with maybe 4,000 yards passing and 30 touchdowns. Still going to be there for Russ if everything goes in the right direction. The guy to probably be speculating on, if you are going to be into that type of thing, is Justin Fields gets a hold of the offense somehow, and then you can get that 2022 1,100 yards rushing, 8 touchdowns that he did in 15 games. That might be a slightly better chance to win a league. Right now, if you have 2 starting quarterbacks, you don't actually have one. They're talking about that Russ is going to have the inside track to be the starter for the Steelers. I don't even know if either of those guys moves the needle on like making George Pickens valuable enough. I think Pat Freiermuth, it probably goes down my board if Russ is the starter. He just doesn't like throwing over the middle of the field. That's where Freiermuth is going to do his work. That would upgrade George Pickens. But from a fantasy perspective, like as a starter, neither of them are probably draftable. Like deeper leagues, maybe Russ, because he could have that rushing spiked week with an okay passing week. So CJ Stroud, this one I was thinking about a little bit. Like we are expecting this positive progression when it comes to passing yards. He would have to hit probably 4,500 to 5,000 yards passing, which is a huge jump. And quarterback 8 overall, which is I think where he should be going, because that would have his disappointment built into his ADP. He finishes as quarterback 12 because he's closer to Tua than he is Joe Burrow, and that's what we're looking at with CJ Stroud. Is maybe he's Joe Burrow, 4,500 yards passing, 30, 40 touchdowns to go along with like 300 yards rushing, and that 3 to 5 rushing yard or rushing touchdowns. That's probably going to be his best overall statistical fantasy year. And it's going to be really difficult to say what year he's going to do that ahead of time. It doesn't necessarily mean he's going to take that jump, even with all those toys. So I would kind of mute my expectations of how he's going to finish. I don't necessarily think he's going to disappoint. I just find it really hard to tell the story about how he finishes as a top 5 guy. And if I'm spending quarterback 8 capital on CJ Stroud, I know that I'm not probably going to get anything more than quarterback 8. That's just how I would see it. And at that point, I personally would go after your Brock Purdy's and your Jordan Loves, and we're going to talk about some of those guys as the process goes on in the offseason. All right, Texans. So or Titans. Will Levis. This is one of those guys that are going to be league winner written all over him. When he was at Penn State before he got to Kentucky, he was kind of used as that like goal line fullback. That's just what his role in the offense was. You also have the possibility that they've gone out, they brought in Calvin Ridley. Maybe they're going to spend on some offensive line. They got rid of Derrick Henry. It looks like the offense is going to be entirely different. Vrabel's gone as the head coach. Like there's a possibility that not just a possibility, but like I could definitely see betting the over on a Jordan Love type of season for Will Levis, with maybe a little bit more rushing upside. So that's like well within his range of outcomes. So yeah, quarterback, 8 to 5. So if I'm putting my money on an undrafted Will Levis going as quarterback 24 to finish as quarterback 5 versus putting my money on a CJ Stroud finishing, and Fantasy Pros has CJ Stroud as quarterback 5, which I think is overvalued. If CJ Stroud is like quarterback 8, and I know that I could even potentially outdo that by putting my money on a Will Levis. This has nothing to do with if I think Will Levis is good at football. It has everything to do with his range of outcomes if the offense goes in a particular direction. So, 4,000 yards passing, 25 touchdowns to go along with, 300 yards rushing and, 3 to 5 touchdowns. Yeah, that's well within his range of outcomes. Going to be criminally undervalued if that's not baked into his ADP. And then finally, to finish off with the Vikings, right now we're kind of expecting. All the mocks that I'm seeing right now with the draft are that the Vikings are going to go out and they're going to bring in a quarterback. They have Sam Darnold. I don't necessarily think that he's going to be. He's one of those guys that may have the range of outcomes in real life to lose a Super Bowl. Jimmy Garoppolo. Don't know how much is going to necessarily move the needle from a fantasy perspective. Going to have very limited rushing upside, even though he had 5 rushing touchdowns in 2021 with Carolina, probably an outlier overall. Also, with the Vikings, there's a better chance that he's going to have a high volume passing offense with the Vikings and Kevin O'Connell as the head coach. Overall, probably a deeper dart throw. So again, if we're looking at the potential range of outcomes for a Sam Darnold versus where he's going, I could definitely see Brock Purdy, 4,200 yards passing, 30 touchdowns, 11 interceptions to go along with probably, and Sam Darnold's probably a little bit more of a rushing upside guy, like 300 yards rushing, 3 rushing touchdowns. That would be the range of outcomes for a guy like Sam Darnold if he's the starting quarterback. And again, with Josh Dobbs, some of the other guys that are out there, Geno Smith, it doesn't actually matter how good at football they are. They have the toys. So again, Sam Darnold, quarterback 35 right now. Yeah, I'd be throwing that dart that I could get Matt Stafford with Sam Darnold in that offense, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson coming back, bringing in Aaron Jones in the passing game also. So there's a lot of stuff to like on that perspective of just throwing the dart at Sam Darnold, either in dynasty leagues or 2 quarterback leagues. Redraft is probably a guy that it's probably a little too rich for me to be putting my money on to expect him to win me a league in a 1 quarterback league, but definitely would be on the radar of that high end range of outcomes that, if everything falls in the right direction. But from a draft perspective with the Vikings, and they're going to have this pick at 11, like a lot of mocks saying that like JJ McCarthy is going to go if to the Vikings trading up for JJ McCarthy. Also like guys like it's going to be really hard to tell what teams value certain guys at. So like Jaden Daniels falling in the draft. I've seen some of the mocks where Michael Penix is the only quarterback left on the board, and a team like the Vikings goes out and takes a flyer on him because they don't want to stake their future on a Sam Darnold. Then we can talk about maybe if some of these guys have some fantasy value, being attached to all the toys that they're going to have in Minnesota overall. So from a fantasy perspective with the rookies, to finish all this off, I think Caleb Williams does have the rushing, um, you know, the rushing upside to potentially win a league. I don't think he's going to be a high volume rushing guy. I think there's going to be enough of ability in his rookie year to potentially return. It's going to be how much he's good at football and how high a volume passing offense that they have. And if we can get him in that Jordan Love type of tier, if I pull him up, if we can get that Jordan Love stat line, Caleb Williams is really going to return on investment. So again, 4,200 yards passing, 30 touchdowns to go along with like 200 yards rushing and 4 touchdowns. What I would be expecting from Caleb Williams this year, as an over underline. So I could definitely see him disappointing at that stat line. I could also see that he can return on investment. Jane Daniels, I don't even know. You're banking on the higher rushing upside, so you're thinking like Lamar Jackson. I don't know if he's not Lamar Jackson. I don't know how much of the rushing upside he's going to have. They're going to probably have to build an offense around his accuracy limitations. And the teams that he would go to, I would just really not like to see him go. Like maybe Washington, I would like to see him go to. That would increase his overall value. Drake May, again, where he goes, does gonna have some like Will Levis light in him. I think he's a better prospect than Will Levis, but it does have a little bit of deceptive. Like Justin Herbert would be another guy that I would look at with Drake May. JJ McCarthy would be like an upside Brock Purdy from a fantasy perspective. And again, the road for these guys to win leagues with their as rookies with some of their flaws is going to be tough. Like Bo Nix, I just don't know if there's enough rushing upside to get him there. Probably like closer to a Derek Carr as a comp. Michael Penix Jr. That he's going to be like really difficult to evaluate, and it's another guy that like theoretically could have some rushing upside in fantasy. That's just not kind of how he plays his game anymore. So that's going to be like difficult. Now we're pushing some of these rookies up into these higher volume passing offenses, trying to think that they're going to have like a CJ Stroud type of like rookie campaign. And they're I didn't think CJ Stroud was what CJ Stroud was going to be coming out of college. And I don't think that any of these guys are going to be as good at information processing as he turned out to be at the NFL level. So anyway, that's about all I got with all this. And hopefully I'll break these guys down and we'll get into the tiers of like the rushing upside guys, the safe rushing guys, and then all those other guys, and then the dart throws. That's what my plan is to get out, and then the final quarterback rankings.